afternoon session of the Board of Supervisors on May 1st, 2018. As is our custom, we'll begin with an invocation led by Reverend John Meyer of the St. Francis Episcopal Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Supervisor Alvarez. So if you'll please rise as you're able, and Reverend, if you please come forward.
Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, whose glory is in all the world, we commend this county to your merciful care, that being guided by your providence, we may dwell secure in your peace. Grant to the supervisors of this county and to all in authority in this county wisdom and strength to know and to do your will. Fill them with the love of truth and righteousness. Make them ever mindful of their calling to serve this people in your fear, through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, world without end. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the citizen comment period. This is a period which anyone may come forward to address this body on any item of Goochland County business. I'll go ahead and open up the citizen comment period. Anyone like to come forward? Seeing Jonathan come forward, I will just remind you to please give us your name and address for the record.
Jonathan Lyle, 1521 Mannequin Road. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Here we go.
I got the drill.
You've read your rights before. Okay.
My name is Jonathan Lyle. I'm the Managing Director of Highway Information Media, which is a marketing and logistics company serving the tourism industry. And next week is Tourism Week. I've extended an invitation to Mr. Ryan or one of his designates to be our company's guest at the Richmond Region Tourism Breakfast at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art next Thursday. Tourism is a business or an industry that a lot of folks maybe don't realize is an industry. I think of vacation frequently, but I spend money on meals, accommodations, and refrigerator magnets particularly. But it is an industry, and Goochland is part of the Richmond region, but it's not in many ways. But I would like to think that Field Day of the Past, the Deep Run Horse Shows, Rassawick, Licking Hole Creek, Tucker Park, Leeks Mill, and the new Hardywood facility are all genesises of tourism activities. People come here, they spend their money, and then they go someplace else for their kids to get educated and to go to the hospital or whatever other type of emergencies we might have. So it is an industry, and I would like to be part of, as a volunteer, of helping Goochland explore some of the opportunities business-wise in that tourism arena. But I'm somebody who benefits from adult supervision, so left to my own devices, I might come up with concept or ideas that may not fit with some of the larger plans that the county has. So if there's something I can share from having spent the better part of 15 years working in the tourism arena with Virginia Tourism as a client, my client, I'd be more than happy to share that. I think there are some economies of scale. I've heard the comment that joining the Richmond Region Tourism Commission would put Goochland in a donor capacity as opposed to a beneficiary capacity. I think there's some very low barrier to entry opportunities joining the Tourism Association that's statewide, which would be $1,000, not tens of thousands of dollars. So there's my pitch for clean industry. It does have an impact on traffic. I won't deny otherwise, but it is something that I think the county could benefit from. So there's my offer. Take what you like, leave the rest. And Mr. Lumpkins, welcome aboard. I did see the cake in there. It said, "Congratulations, you are bored," I think is what it said, but I'm not sure. They may have cut some of that cake out by the time I got there. I'm not sure, but good to see you there. I will entertain and I do have some Virginia's for Lovers stickers, mini stickers. I'll leave those on the back table for anybody who would like one. Whatever you love in a vacation, you can find it in Virginia. Love is at the heart of every Virginia vacation. So that's their tagline. Liked it, blink.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Lowell. You make an excellent ambassador for Goodson County and Virginia as a whole, so thank you for that. Anyone else like to come forward?
Rebuttal.
Yeah, anyone like to? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. The next item on the agenda is the chairman's comments. I just have two quick comments to make. The first is, for those that are paying close attention, you'll recognize that we have a new face up here on the board, Mr. John Lumpkins, and I would like to just officially welcome him. He's been an official member of this board for about an hour now, and since we are a right-to-work state, we put him right to work. Let's make him feel relevant. How about a round of applause? Make him feel welcome. Great. Welcome, John. We look forward to working with you together going forward. As many of you know, he's not a stranger to Goodson County, having served the county for 6 years on the school board and most recently as their chair. The other item I want to mention very quickly, at noon today, the Finance and Audit Committee met, and we are going to be proposing some revised and tightened up financial policies as part of the consent agenda later on in this meeting. But those modifications are designed to bring us in line with best practices in Virginia. So that'll come later on in the agenda. That's all I had as the chairman. The next item would be the county administrator comments. Mr. Badesky, do you have any comments for the group?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you. Just a couple brief comments. One of the pleasures that I get in my role is to serve as an ex officio member of the Pet Lovers Organization, who is raising funds for us for the animal shelter project that's under construction. At this point, they are now publicly sharing that they have raised over $1.5 million towards the project and are looking at sort of their next phase of life as a organization. They've been a great partner for us. They have been paying us the contribution that they owe us, $1,250,000 in portions, and I had the pleasure this Sunday to represent the county in receiving another check for $225,000 this Sunday, and so you may see some promotion on that. But above and beyond the check, the event itself was a Pet Olympics that they hosted to raise some funds. I know Mr. Alvarez had a chance to go and be present there, but the work that volunteer committee has done in partnership with us is exemplary, and really appreciate the opportunity to represent the board there. Mr. Stamey, Mr. Clough and his team all work with them fairly closely, and they are a passionate group, and it's nice to see that energy. So that was one thing. They are hosting numerous events. They have different events all throughout the community. If you're a dog lover, cat lover, pet in general, check out Pet Lovers, and they're always looking for more assistance. Last thing, Mr. Chairman, not often do we stop to pat ourselves on the back in local government, but we are in the month that celebrates the local government profession. And just do want to take an opportunity to thank all of our employees and our partners with the schools and constitutional officers and others that we don't go asking for anyone to say thank you or pat us on the back for a job well done. We just do it because it's a public service, and we really value that opportunity. And just thank the team for all the work that they do every day.
Great. That it?
That's it.
Great. Well, we certainly do have a generous county in terms of Pet Lovers donations, and we certainly do have the hardest working, best staff in all of Virginia, so we want to thank them for all their hard work. All right, next item on the agenda is a proclamation recognizing May 2018 as Older Americans Month, I guess is the correct term these days. I didn't ask you to raise your hand. And I believe we have a proclamation that Lisa will be able to read for us, and I think, is Penny Jordan here? Would you like to come forward? I guess Penny is our Goodson coordinator with Senior Connections. I think she'll be the one to receive the, so if you wouldn't mind reading the resolution.
Okay. Whereas Goochland County includes almost 6,000 residents aged 60 and over who have enriched and strengthened the community at every age, and whereas May is recognized as Older Americans Month by the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia as a time to celebrate the contributions of older residents and the many ways they make a difference in the community, and whereas this year's theme for Older Americans Month is Engage at Every Age, which emphasizes that residents can take part in diverse activities throughout their lives, and whereas Goochland County is committed to engaging and supporting older adults, their families, and caregivers, and whereas Senior Connections joins with the Goochland Department of Social Services and other local groups to ensure that older residents have supportive and protective services at every age to allow them to enjoy the best possible quality of life. And whereas Goochland County acknowledges the importance of taking a part in activities that promote physical, mental, and emotional well-being, no matter the age of residents, and whereas Goochland County enriches the lives of individuals of every age by promoting home and community-based services that support independent living, involving older adults in community planning, social events, and other activities, providing opportunities for older adults to work, volunteer, learn, lead, and mentor, supporting multi-generational opportunities. Now therefore be it resolved that the Goochland County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim May 2018 to be Older Americans Month. We urge every resident to take time during this month to recognize older adults and the people who serve them as vital parts of our community.
Thank you. Okay, no problem. Just want to say thank you. It's an honor to be here to recognize Older Americans Month and to accept this on behalf of the older Americans in Goochland County.
Great, have a round of applause. The answer is 60 is the new 40, but I don't know if I made that progress or not. Okay. Ready? Take two. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, the next item. Oh, I'm sorry. Now that we've heard the resolution and awarded it, do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the proclamation as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Good, we don't need to take the proclamation back.
Good choice, sir.
So, all right.
Straight on.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is any request to postpone agenda items, additions, deletions, or corrections, or changes to the order of presentation today. Board, what's your pleasure? Are there any suggested changes?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed. The next item on the agenda is the minutes approval. The minutes for our last, well, three of our last meetings, March 13th, March 20th, and April 3rd, are included in the package that you've had in advance and had a chance to read through. Are there any additions, deletions, changes, or corrections to the minutes as they're presented? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the March 13th, March 20th, and April 3, 2018 meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? You're good? Okay, all right, sounds good. Just want to make sure. Good, thank you. All right, so the minutes are approved as presented. The next item on the agenda is the reports. The first report is from VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation. Mr. Marshall Wynn would like to come forward and enlighten us as to VDOT's activities.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Badesky, welcome, Mr. Lumpkins. Marshall Wynn with VDOT. This past month, we've been real busy with pothole patching and everything. We patched 406 potholes this past month. Been working on 3 of the rural rustics in the county. Pink Dogwood, Three Chop, and Martin. They'll be the first three that we prime and double seal, which should take place in the next couple of weeks. Still have 2 more to do. That'd be in Soldiers Lodge and Lee Road off of Route 6. They'll be the next 2 we tackle after we finish these 3. And they'll probably be done before the end of our fiscal year, which is the end of June. Okay? Still continue to cut trees throughout the county and do lemon activities, ditch cleaning, that sort of thing. We just swept the town of Goochland today down through the sidewalk area. We're working with an incidental concrete contractor to come out next week to look at, there's 12 sites on the sidewalks through the town of Goochland that we're going to be repairing in the near future, which will mean taking out some sections and pouring back some sections, just to let you know what's getting ready to happen. Some of those areas we'll have to block off once we dig them out. We'll dig out a few of them, put caution fence around them, and then come back and pour a few of them, and then just work our way down through the town and everything. Let's see. Work requests, we've had like 27 work requests throughout the month. These work requests we got, they multiply, and we completed 37 work requests throughout the county. So we received 27, but we actually completed 37, which is a build-up over the past few months. Mannequin Road, I'm sure some of y'all have been driving down that section where the gas line has been put in. There was a meeting last week with Richmond City Gas. That section where they put the gas line, the contractor with Richmond City Gas is going to come through there and repave that whole section. The only section that they have to mill is right there in front of the new subdivision on the left. What do they call it? Saddle Creek, right at that area. That's fairly new pavement, so they'll mill that, tie it in, and repave that section. Like I said, that's coming. I'm not exactly sure what the schedule is, but we work with Richmond City Gas, and they're going to end up paving everything, because with the traffic running down the shoulders, it broke shoulders up and cracked the pavement. So it's best just to repave the whole thing from the private road where the gas line came in. Couple of construction items that we bring up every month, the 288, 250 project. There's an opportunity to move that up, as y'all have seen. I think the big hurdle, well, it's not a big hurdle from what I'm understanding, it's right away from the auto folks right there and the utilities. I think there are 2 key parts to make that accelerate some, which you can see the dates on the report. And the other one is Patterson, West Creek. Looks like they've got some of the materials on hand, and they're going to be doing the work this fall. So with that, if you have any questions, please let me know.
Mr. Wayne, on the 288 in Broad, there was a community meeting, right? There was a
Yeah.
community meeting.
Yeah, I was at the community meeting.
Yes, was there any feedback from that meeting that you
No.
received that you need
No.
to share with us?
I was there, Danny Baden, Ray Wright, my staff, we were all there. Nothing earth-shattering at all. So it was, there was quite a few people there to begin with. And we had program managers there. Traffic engineering was there to answer any questions that might have come up. And as far as I know, there weren't that many questions. I know Todd was there, so.
The feedback
Tom.
favorable or unfavorable, or what was the?
No, I met some interesting folks, though. That's all I can tell you. And they weren't even talking about, the project at all. So I met a old VDOTer from the central office, and he knew a few people I knew back in the day. So, but it was interesting. So.
Okay, good. Board, any comments or questions for Vito at this point? Mr. Travers?
One question, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wynn, you mentioned ditch cleaning. Do you know if they've gone through Whitehall Road? After we had that big rain a couple weeks ago, a week ago.
A lot of leaves in the ditches.
All the
Okay.
leaves were blocking the water, so the water was across the road.
Okay.
In a couple of places, especially down near the creek.
All right,
Near-
I'll get with Sandy Hook and get them to take care of that.
Yeah,
The area headquarters.
And that's it. We talked about some other things that, looking at for me.
Ms. Laskewett?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. We had talked about Haydensville Fife Road, the
You didn't get
resurface-
my email? Never
I
received
got
it?
your email, and I responded.
Uh-huh.
You had asked for, you'd said that you'd hope to have the work done this year, and the question is,
For Haydensville Fife,
yes,
where the pavement marking eradication was? Is
yes,
that what you're talking about? Yeah,
Yes.
that's on our schedule work this year, that section of road where the eradication is,
right. So the question is fiscal year or calendar year?
this summer.
Okay,
This
fiscal
summer.
year. Okay, good. That was one. That makes a difference. That helps.
Okay, okay.
And then the other issue was you're still looking at Prior Road, the guardrail
Yeah,
situation.
we looked at the guardrail, and we've submitted that information to traffic engineering. They will go
Both
out.
places?
Yes, both
Okay.
the pond and the creek.
Right.
That I asked you about.
Right.
And they will make a determination whether.
Okay, so that's still in the
guardrail-
works.
Yeah, yeah,
Wonderful.
once I find out from traffic engineering, I'll let you know.
Thank you very much. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
Other, Mr. Minnick?
Hey, Mr. Nguyen, just one quick question. On Mannequin Road, when do you anticipate that the repaving is going to start there?
I gotta find that out.
Okay.
I need to get with permits. It was a permit supervisor, one of the inspectors, and myself in the meeting. I'll find out and let you know probably
Okay.
by the end of the week, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Just want to try and give as much notice as we can. 'Cause,
Right.
You know, there's a fair amount of traffic on Mannequin. Okay, cool.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
they'll be restricted only
Yeah, I
to
know.
work between probably 9 and
Right.
3. They won't be working during rush hour. That's
Yeah.
what I recommended to them. I mean, they can pave it at night if they want. Would be fine with me, so.
There'll be signage
Oh, yeah.
saying, beginning Monday, this road will be.
I mean, if
you know,
they
whatever.
need a message board, I
Yeah.
will supply that
Okay.
ahead of time to let folks know to expect delays
There we go.
in that
There we
area.
go.
So,
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you for all you do, Mr. Wynn.
all right, thank you.
All right. Okay. The next report will be introduction of new county staff. Ms. Parrish would like to come forward and introduce our new staff members.
Board, Mr.
Afternoon.
Tedeschi. Kelly Parrish, Director of Human Resources, and it is my pleasure to, on behalf of County Administration, to present our new staff for today. And we have them in General Services and Community Development. Due to a resignation, Thomas Southworth joined the Convenience Center staff as a part-time attendant on April 11th. Thomas comes to us with experience from Louisa County, where he served in a similar role. Due to a departmental reorganization, Brandon McKinney joined the General Services team on April 16th as a part-time groundskeeper. Brandon is currently a volunteer firefighter for Goochland County and was a farm helper at Lloyd Family Farms. And today we actually have Charles Littlefield with us. So Casey, if you would stand, please. Due to a resignation, Casey Littlefield began his employment on May 1st as a senior combination commercial inspector with the Department of Building Inspections. Casey comes to us from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development, where he was a senior construction inspector. Prior to that, Casey worked in building inspections for Hanover County and Louisa County. So let's welcome them.
Oh, welcome.
And welcome, Mr. Lumpkins. And with that, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Parrish. Thank you. And welcome to one and all. Okay. The next two items are in your packet for information only, the planning and development activity and the accounts payable. Are there any questions or concerns about those reports? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We've got a number of items on the consent agenda, and I'll ask our county administrator, Mr. Badesky, if he wouldn't touch on some of the high points on each of the consent items.
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Badesky.
Chairman, thank you so much. If you'll indulge me, I'm going to spend a little extra time on the consent agenda today than potentially normally. These items on the consent agenda are items that we've been working on over periods of time, addressed in prior meetings, or have shared with the board in some format, but I want to spend a little bit of time on each of the topics today. The first item on your consent agenda is an amendment to the clerk of court's budget. This is for $10,820 for records preservation state grant funds. The clerk diligently tries to apply for these funds to do restoration of old historic books. She had received a grant, and this would appropriate the additional funds to her office that she has earned. Item number 2 is an amendment to the County Capital Improvement Fund. This item specifically refers to an amendment to this capital improvement program for the Goochland Elementary School project. This is $200,000 of proffer funds that will be utilized to do site assessments along Bulldog Way for a potential new school location. And so these are funds that were again gained through proffer collections over the years. We do anticipate that a portion of the Goochland Elementary School project is going to be an expansion of capacity over current availability. Item number 3 is consideration of amendments to financial management policies. Mr. Chairman, you hit the highlights, so to speak, as you introduced during your comments here today, but I really wanted to spend just a moment hitting the highlights. We always work towards best management practices when it comes to any of the county's finances. We often have an opportunity to reevaluate and strengthen our policies, and that's exactly what the policies you have in hand here today do. We have both on a debt side, we are strengthening our debt policies and making sure it's clear on how we utilize and manage debt funds and specifically the general fund impact. And second is our policy on creating reserve accounts. Right now, you already do have a fund that we set aside for cash reserves. It's only at this point about $500,000. As we review our policies, we had proposed that we actually increase that to about 3% of our annual operating budget. Those funds currently are all sitting in an unassigned account. We're specifically designating that with triggers on how you can utilize those funds for future years. There actually are specific triggers based on when the board can access those funds, as well as specific requirements of the board to replenish those funds, and within a 3-year period of utilization. And so there are triggers for how you can utilize up to 1.5% within the current fiscal year, and in subsequent fiscal years, the additional 1.5%. So it allows us to have a fund to continue to protect us. And again, while it is a new policy to the board, collectively, we've had the funds in the unassigned account. So we're just designating them specifically. There's higher triggers on when you can actually use the funds. And so I dare say these are even more conservative policies than we had prior. And so there are opportunities for us to make improvements. As we continue to look for consideration as we look at the bonding opportunities for a county, having strong financial policies will continue to best position us for those achievements. So those policies were reviewed today with the Finance and Audit Committee and recommended to the board with full support for consideration here this afternoon. The next item on item number 4 on consent agenda is authorization for myself to execute an on-call heating, air conditioning, and ventilation contract, HVAC. There is a single contract that you have here in front of you that allows us on an on-call basis to engage services to have HVAC improvements. Historically, we would do individual bids that were much more time consuming. This puts us in a position where we did do a proper procurement to get the vendors in for consideration, and this now allows us to have an on-call heating and air service. You will see more of these kinds coming to the board in the future, just to allow us to have more expeditious service as it relates to certain trades. Item number 5. This item is one that's been in the works for almost 2 years to come to you today. This is a recommendation to authorize myself to execute an agreement for software and implementation services for what we call an ERP solution. This is basically, bless you, this is a replacement to our current financial operating system. The contract is for the initial 2 modules with an opportunity for expansion. with Tyler. These contracts have been, and agreements have been reviewed in concert with our consultant, Barry Dunn. We've had a committee of staff representatives and constitutional officers to help in this review. We have positioned ourselves to add a potential module for the treasurer in the future, should they have that interest, or we will be looking at some future date to add a module that would address some of the treasurer and commissioner's potential needs. So today, for your consideration, is the adoption of this ERP contract. The next item is authorization for myself to execute a lease with the Virginia Department of Forestry. And primarily what this is, if you go down to the Fire Training Center today, we actually house some of the Department of Forestry equipment on our site. This basically gives permission for them to construct a pole barn to cover the equipment, extend the life of the equipment. There have been numerous occasions where our partnership with the Department of Forestry served us well, especially in fire operations, and this just allows for the construction and long-term lease of that space with that new pole barn. And finally, the last item you have on your agenda is a request to initiate and refer to the Planning Commission an amendment to the Goochland County zoning ordinance relating to transient occupancy uses. This is specifically, sometimes we talked about this in the terms of Airbnb or short-term rental. You do have an item later this evening that addresses our home occupation ordinance. This is a more comprehensive review of those ordinances, but we're referring to the Planning Commission at this time that would come back to the board at a subsequent meeting. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's the summary of the consent agenda. I and staff stand ready to answer the questions you may have.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Badesky. Board, any questions, concerns? Okay. Okay. If there is no objection, we can consider these as a group as opposed to removing individual items. Is the board's pleasure to take these as a group?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If that's the case, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Yeah. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it, unanimous. The consent agenda is approved as presented. Thank you very much. The next item is our first item of new business. This will be the third quarter general fund projection and budget amendments. Ms. Horlacher, would you like to come forward and walk us through that, please?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Barbara Horlacher, and I'm the Director of Financial Services. In your packet, you have a copy of the general fund's FY18 third quarter projections. And we'll start at the top and go through each number. No, I'm just kidding. Start with the revenues. You can see that they are forecasted to be approximately $3.8 million over what we originally budgeted. Primarily due to bank stock, which was budgeted at $100,000 and probably will be about $1 million. Personal property will probably come in at about $1 million over what was budgeted, and building permits will probably come in about $500,000 over what was budgeted. Then you see in the expense section, the subtotal shows we will probably come under budget about $1.1 million. Again, this is projection at the third quarter point, so that is a little conservative. And then the result is we end up with operating positive operating surplus of $3.7 million. And then our transfers consist of transfers to the Office of Children's Services and also cash spending on the capital improvement project, which means at the end of all that, the projection is that our total fund balance will stay essentially the same at $34.4 million. And what I've added to this report that is different from the last reports I've showed you is is a breakout of our fund balance and how we project it will be at the end of the year. And this is based on the policies that you just approved. So you see in there that the revenue stabilization, which is about 580,000 right now, will probably end up the year at about $1.8 million. And the unassigned fund balance will now show at 18.2. We're used to seeing that number be 19.4, but because we're adding to the revenue stabilization fund, that is why that brings that number to 18.2, which is still well within our policy that we discussed earlier in this meeting. And we presented this today at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and a lot of great suggestions were made for this report. So I'm going to try to stick to this format, but add some minimums so that we know where you're at all times, and that the report will show where we're at compared to our policy. We'll also add some debt ratios to show exactly where we're at on those. We do have 2 amendments at this point in the year, one for $25,000 to the county administrator's budget. The source of those funds is the reserve for contingencies, and then a $15,000 fuel transfer from grounds management to facilities management. And are there any questions on the third quarter projections?
Any questions for Ms. Horlacher on the budget? What I'm seeing is fairly conservative budgeting on the revenue expectations and fairly
Correct.
conservative budgeting on the expense side, and as a result, we're in pretty good shape. Our
That's
reserves
correct.
look like they're in good shape as well, and we're not emptying those at all, so. that's, But we do have some budget amendments we'll need to approve. Is that the two amendments?
That's correct, the
you
2
mentioned?
amendments as stated in your agenda, yes.
Okay, since that's the case, I'll entertain a motion to approve those budget amendments as presented.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the requested budget amendments as presented.
It's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving those 2 budget amendments as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. It's unanimous. Those budget amendments are approved. Thank you, Ms. Horlacher. Next up is a wrap-up of the General Assembly legislative activity, even though they've not wrapped up their activities.
They've wrapped up almost everything.
Almost, just that one little thing.
Yeah, one little thing, yeah.
So, would you like to walk us through, Paul?
All right. Good afternoon, Paul Drumright, Administrative Services Manager. And it would be my pleasure this afternoon to do a quick walkthrough of the 2018 General Assembly legislative wrap-up, the activity that has occurred earlier this year. We're going to take a look real quick both at what occurred during the session, look at some of the priority requests for the county, hit bills of interest, and then cover some post-session legislative activity, and then that one pesky little item, the state budget at the very end. So the General Assembly adjourned on March 10th and then had their reconvened session on April 18th. I've included on the slide in front of you just the statistics that are out there now of bills as they went from introduced to approved, and as you can see, a large majority did not make it through the whole process. And actually, I think the very telling one is the last one where very few bills were vetoed, so I think there's some good working together.
Well, for the folks that are watching at home, the difference between a bill that's passed and a bill that's approved, could you please just elaborate?
So the bill that was passed, that passed its individual house. So bills from the House made it out of that House onto the next one. Approved, it's been approved by both the House and the Senate and gone on to the governor, and the governor has signed it.
Great, thank you.
Moving along to the priority request, we had nothing this year, again, related to transportation of sludge. Our second item was the Economic Development Authority composition, where we were asking to change the makeup of the EDA to bring it in line with other boards and commissions in the county. That was approved by the governor on March 19th and becomes effective July 1st. So that is one of our first successes. Moving on to the next items, public facility capacity determination. That was another high priority for us. We had two bills related to that, one in the House, HB 163, did not make it out of subcommittee. SB 458 is actually still alive. Thanks to our senator, he helped us with this bill. It was actually heard in committee or passed by temporarily in committee on April 17th. And there is some work related to trying to get some compromise on this piece of legislation. And I'm going to talk more about the proffer-type bills at a slide later on in the packet. But so we do still have one bill that is still alive and moving through the process. Under expand broadband, there is in the budget that is right now been approved by the House and is waiting action by the Senate, a bill related to adding $2 million to grants for its Virginia Telecommunication Initiative. And this allows localities that partner with a provider to get grants to expand broadband in certain areas of the county. So it used to be $1 million, so they're moving it up to $2 million per year, which is it's better than nothing. Moving on, we had another one of our priority requests related to the reimbursement for the compensation and expense of the electoral board. There were no corresponding bills for that one. There was a corresponding type bill related to the reimbursement for political party primaries. Unfortunately, that bill did not make its way through the whole process. It didn't even make it out of its own house. To our other success, we had a bill related to tourism, or tourist-oriented directional signs, and the picture on the screen says it all. Delegate McGuire was carrying this bill for us. This bill did not make it out of committee because they worked out a compromise before it came up. And that allowed the sign that you see up on your screen to occur. And so the signs are up now for the Goochland Drive-In. And this not only benefited Goochland, but it benefited the other drive-ins in the Commonwealth. So we're talking about another 5 drive-ins would be able to do this as well. So definitely very thankful for Delegate McGuire with this. Moving on, so talking about conditional zoning, proffer bills. There are still 3 bills that are active. Our bill SB 458 that I talked about earlier, and then 2 others, SB 208 related to impact fees, and SB 944 related to cash proffers, eliminating them and moving to impact fees. So on April 17th, a meeting had occurred. Some of those bills were heard. Ours was one of the ones. These other 2 were not heard. They are going to be heard later, but so they are still alive related to proffers and rezoning. There were a number of other bills related to it as well that failed, didn't make it out of the House or didn't make it out of the Senate. So on your screen are the list of those bills. And one of those, the second one down, was our bill that was carried by Delegate Ware. That did get heard by a subcommittee, but that subcommittee didn't move it forward. This is a topic that is very important, and I'll have more to share in a moment on that. Other bills of interest we had were HB 181 and SB 774. These were both related to handheld personal communications in driving. This was of interest to us because the amateur radio operators in the county had asked to try to get exemptions in these bills so that they could use their equipment as they were out doing either responding for emergencies or as well as just doing practices or working races or other events. Good news is both of these bills did not pass, which means the current law stands, and that law does not prohibit them using their devices how they use them currently. So the concern is no longer right now warranted, but I have a feeling these bills will be back next year. The other one, HB 874, relates to Certificate of Public Need, and it was creating a three-phase process to sunset requirements. Certificate of Public Need relates to medical facilities and outpatient surgery centers, nursing homes, and other items like that, where they have to go through a regulatory process to get a certificate to operate. And we've been watching this, and for a number of years, there's been talk of COPN reform. This bill didn't make it, but I have some more on the next slide talking about what that is, what is coming down the pike on that. So on to those two items, both the conditional zoning proffers, impact fees, as well as COPN. The Senate Committee on Local Government held a proffer party on April 17th and heard all the proffer bills that had still existed in the committee. That included our bill being carried by Senator Peake. They disposed of two bills, kept our bill alive. Our bill can still have action on it up to November of this year. Unfortunately, it will have to come back next year really to go through the full process, but we can work on it and get a compromise. The committee, talking to both local governments and the home builders, made it very clear that compromise needs to occur related to the conditional zoning, the proffer laws, because if a compromise doesn't come forward and both sides work together, that they will exercise their legislative authority next year, and that either side may not be happy with the result out of that process. That is a good outcome because that's really gotten the home builders willing to work with localities. We actually got held up by the home builders as an example of a locality that has made an effort to comply with the existing law. But so there is renewed interest in working together to try to come to some compromise. And we'll be keeping track of that. Those impact fee bills I mentioned, they are going to be heard later this summer at a separate session, so we'll call that Proffer Party 2. And so we'll be watching that to see how that shakes out and the progress with our other bill. But we spent, on just our proffer bills, spent a good morning sitting there discussing and hearing from the committee. So there is interest in solving it once and for all. They're tired of hearing, oh, give us another year, give us another year. They want action done. Moving on to the House Health, Welfare, and Institution Committee, COPN, as I mentioned, there was that one bill that got continued to next year. This committee has convened a work group of 6 members of the General Assembly to focus on COPN. They already had their first meeting on April 18th and heard the history of COPN, and they are going to be focusing on what they can do to try to bring some reform to that. Their focus is on quality, affordability, and accessibility for the citizens. And so I'm inclined to see some progress there. That's in the House. I haven't seen any other action on this in the Senate yet. But so they're working on that through their off season, as we'll call it. Moving on to the state budget, the General Assembly, obviously, they adjourned without passing a budget. They did convene on April 11th for their budget special session. The House then passed an amended budget on April 17th. The Senate, they're now waiting on the Senate to come back on May 14th to refer that bill that the House has passed, and then to actually consider it both in their Finance Committee and then in the full Senate themselves. I can share that there are some amendments we've been tracking in the previous budget. Those amendments are not in the current House budget. Related to the JLARC biosolids study recommendations, those didn't make it in, but I have a feeling there's a whole lot of stuff that didn't make it in because they're trying to work on a compromise and get a budget done. So we'll just keep our eyes out on that as well. And with that, that is the wrap-up. I'm happy to take any questions. I will note that the county attorney's office will be coming back at a future meeting to discuss the implications of the bills that had been passed and any action that the board does need to take.
We're planning to be before you in work session next month with ordinance authority that you have to adopt or that you're required to adopt based on the bills passed this General Assembly.
Good, good, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Mr. Drumright?
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
And maybe Mr. Badesky there is no budget, state budget right now. We're hopeful there'll be one soon. If there's not one forthcoming, at some point, things will happen. And are we beginning to think about if this happens, then this, and if that happens, then that? Are we beginning to think about preparations and how it might impact our budget if there is no state budget?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's one of those items that you hope they get their act together and we don't have to address. It's a good news, bad news situation for Goochland County. Because we're less dependent on the state, our day-to-day operations do not rely as much on them adopting their budget. That's not to say there's not an impact. I do believe we have opportunities to move forward, assuming that they will adopt a budget for a period of time, but we're certainly monitoring it closely. And as it gets closer to the end of June, we may have to come back to you, but I think we're relatively confident that we can bridge for a short period of time. We're substantially in compliance with all of our policies, so if we had to do so, we have enough reserve to manage a period of time. If we see a level of uncertainty of a greater extent, we may have to have a different conversation. But I think we're relatively well positioned to carry through even a short transition. But again, while we're less dependent than other jurisdictions on the state budget, it is still a significant portion of our overall operating outside of the general fund. So still encourage our elected officials at the state level to act expeditiously and understand the implications to the localities for their delay in action.
Sure, okay. Well, thank you. Well, we'll hope for the best and plan for the worst. And as you point out, we are probably among the least dependent for transfers from the state of any county, so we're in a good position that way, and have reserves to rely on that are perhaps much larger than the average county, so that we're better positioned, but we'd still like to have a state budget. So, but thank you. Thank you. All righty. Let's see. That was the wrap-up of the General Assembly activity. Thank you for that, and thank you for, was it 3,800 bills or something like that? So I can imagine the spreadsheet you have to track all that, so thank you for doing that. The next item on the agenda is appointments. I don't believe we have any appointments at this point. Ms. Gawitz, okay. Moving on then, the next item on the agenda is a closed meeting. At this point, I guess we'll need a motion to go into closed session. Do we have, Mr. Alvarez, would you like to make a motion?
I will, Mr. Chairman.
In just a
Our
second.
attorney's trying to find it, but I have it right here in front of me. Paper is always better. Okay, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with the provisions of Virginia Code 2.2-3711 and 2.2-3712, I move that the Goochland County Board of Supervisors convene in closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the performance and duties of the county administrator and county attorney as permitted by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Mr. Badesky, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, it's been moved and passed. We will go into closed session. Following the closed session, we'll come back out and certify that only closed session business was conducted. And then we'll go on a dinner break and we will come back here at 7 p.m. To reconvene the board meeting. So with that, this afternoon session will go into recess for a closed session and a dinner break.
3712D, I move that the Goochland County Board of Supervisors hereby certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Freedom of Information Act, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Goochland County Board of Supervisors in the closed meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Mr. Badesky, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Minnick? Yes. Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you for the certification. The next item is the dinner break, so we will recess for dinner and reconvene back here at 7 p.m. for our evening session. So, thank you. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening to the evening meeting of the Goochland County Board of Supervisors on May 1st, 2018. The first item on the agenda for this evening is a resolution celebrating the life of Mr. Ned Creasy. I'm going to exercise a bit of executive privilege here and just give a bit of a preamble for the backdrop on why we're here to celebrate this life. Mr. Creasy is one of the very few people that I know that has the greatest love and admiration for his fellow man. No greater love hath that who would be willing to lay down their life for their fellow man. He not only once, not twice, but 3 times donned 3 different uniforms, each of which he ran toward the risk at great personal sacrifice, potentially sacrificing his own life for the benefit and service of others. First in the Navy, then as a police officer, and then as a volunteer fireman. Each time he donned the uniform, he swore an oath to put his life at risk for those of others, and that is the greatest love. Now, I'm not counting when he put on a coat and tie and served on the Board of Supervisors, because sometimes you feel like you're putting your life at risk, but I won't count that for now. But it's not just him, it's his entire family, a number of which are here this evening to share with us. He has 2 sons in law enforcement, again, taking the same oath, putting on the same uniform. He has 2 grandsons in the Marine Corps, again, donning a uniform, putting their life at risk. The entire, you get the idea, the entire family has dedicated their lives to serving others, which is incredibly commendable. And of course, his wife Diana being a nurse and running EMS calls, again, to save lives. So, with that as a bit of a backdrop, the Board of Supervisors, the county staff, and the citizens all wish to celebrate the life of Ned Creasy, a valued colleague, thoughtful mentor, good friend, respected public servant, and community leader for Goochland County, with a resolution of remembrance on May 1st, 2018. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and read the resolution and see if I can get all the way through it. Resolution celebrating the life of Ned S. Creasy. Whereas Ned Creasy, a consummate public servant who was the longest-serving active member of the Goochland County Board of Supervisors, died on March 10th, 2018. And whereas after graduating from Colchester High School in 1962, Ned Creasy joined the United States Navy and served his country as a communications technician. And whereas following his honorable military service, Ned Creasy served as a police officer for the Macomb Police Department in Macomb, Illinois. And whereas, after serving the citizens of Macomb, Illinois, Ned Creasy then began his lifelong career in construction, working as a foreman on the John Hancock Building in Chicago, Illinois, and later joining the construction firm of Whiting Turner. And whereas, in the early 1970s, Ned Creasy moved his family to Goochland County, managing several construction projects in the Richmond area for companies like DuPont, Philip Morris, and the Bank of Virginia. And whereas shortly thereafter, Ned Creasy started his own constructing company and constructed residential, commercial, and government properties throughout the state of Virginia. And whereas throughout his life, Ned Creasy worked tirelessly to build a better world for his family and his community, serving as a lifetime member of the American Legion and a former deacon of the Salem Baptist Church. And whereas Ned Creasy was a lifetime member of the Goodson County Volunteer Fire Rescue Association with over 30 years of experience, serving on their board of directors for 14 years. And whereas Ned Creasy was an avid amateur extra-class radio operator, a member of the Navy Amateur Radio Club, and was active in the ARES Radio Emergency Services, and was a huge proponent of emergency preparedness. And whereas Ned Creasy worked with organizations and residents to create and implement a countywide emergency disaster response system. And whereas answering the call of friends and neighbors and desiring to be of further service to his fellow residents, Ned Creasy ran for and was elected to the Goodson County Board of Supervisors in 2008, 2012, and 2016, representing District 3 for more than 10 years, serving 2 terms as chair of the board. And whereas Ned Creasy was a humble man who never sought the spotlight, was always focused on getting the job done, was a thoughtful and responsive leader who served District 3 with the utmost dedication and distinction, and helped make Goodson County a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. And whereas Ned Creasy was a person of deep faith, strong character, integrity beyond reproach, unparalleled dedication, and an unwavering commitment to his core beliefs. And whereas Ned Creasy will be fondly remembered and greatly missed by his beloved wife of 53 years, Diana, the children, Teresa, Sean, Scott, Tonya, and Stephen, and their families, and numerous other family members and friends. Now therefore be it resolved that the Goodson County Board of Supervisors hereby notes with great sadness the loss of Ned Creasy, a valued colleague, thoughtful mentor, good friend, respected public servant, and community leader in Goodson County. Signed, Ken Peterson, Chairman, Goodson County Board of Supervisors. Board, you've heard the resolution. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Any abstentions? Appears to be unanimous. Everybody loves Ned Creasy. Fantastic. At this point, I'd like all of the members of the Creasy family that are here to please come forward, recognizing that it's a small fraction of the entire Creasy family. But if you'd all please come forward and join me at the podium, I'd like to present you with that resolution. And on behalf of a grateful county, I'd like you to accept this resolution, and may God bless you and your family and give you faith. Look at the camera. It's like a wedding that photographer always wanted. Yeah, before you go anywhere, I've got a couple of other things. This is just a letter from the Board of Supervisors. I've got a little bit of a photo album. I'm sorry to put you through that. For those of you that knew Ned, he actually led a fundamental transformation of Goodson County. I don't think that's an exaggeration. In December, he was chair of this board. It was my honor to go out to Nashville, Tennessee, and receive an award from the ALEC that Goodson County, when Ned was chairman, was the most taxpayer-friendly county in the entire nation. So we had a miniature of that award made up, and we'd like to present you with that as well. He took Goodson from worst to first. Thank you so much for that. Would you like to say anything or address the group at all?
outpouring that we've received during the passing of Ned and following that time. And I just appreciate every one of you. Thank you for being here.
Please stay here because we're not done keeping things on you if you've got more hands to carry or something.
Okay. Yeah.
At this point, we're honored to have with us our state senator, Mark Peep, and two members of our House of Delegates, Lee Ware and John McGuire, and they have some presentations to make to you as well. So I'd like to invite them to come up front and join us. Thank you.
Ken, thank you very much, and it's really an honor for all of us to be here. I had the privilege of knowing Ned going back quite a number of years. We were in the Sunday school class together, and it was a joy to see his service. We have a resolution. It had not been framed in time for us to present it, but we will bring both a copy for the county and a copy for the family. And my colleagues have flags that we'll present in just a moment. I have the resolution, and I'm going to read elements of it. Some of it tracks what the county resolution does, and I'll try not to be repetitive, although I may mention a few things from that. But this is largely from the text of that and an appreciation that we in Richmond express to you and to particularly to Ned for the service that he sustained over the years for Richmond. It is styled House Resolution number 529, and it was adopted on April 17th. Whereas the election to public office by the neighbors of one's own community is at once a sacred trust and an indication of having achieved the self-governing virtues that our founding fathers intended to be a principal characteristic of the governance of the respective jurisdictions of our republic. And whereas Ned Creasy answered the summons of his neighbors in District 3 to seek election to the Goochland County Board of Supervisors in 2007, was elected by a wide margin, and was re-elected by ever larger margins to further terms. And whereas Ned Creasy assumed his responsibilities at a time when the county's government had been shaken by a breach of trust. And whereas by cooperating with the four other individuals elected with him and on similar pledges to right the county's ship of state, Ned Creasy helped steer the county's government to state and even national recognition, alluding to the recognition that Ken just mentioned. Whereas Ned was twice elected by his colleagues to serve as chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and he was twice elected as vice chairman. And whereas Ned S. Creasy was instrumental in every advance made by the county over the decade of his service, and was especially devoted to securing Goochland's new emergency communications center and emergency operations center, and vast improvements in the county's public safety radio system. And then the next few things refer to his growing up and his service in the Navy and as a police officer and in his construction work. And whereas Ned S. Creasy was a devoted husband to his wife, Diana Crandall Creasy, and a loving father to their 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. And whereas Ned S. Creasy was devoted to the church and was a former deacon of Salem Baptist Church at Crozier. Whereas Ned was deeply engaged in the community of Goochland, a longtime member of the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association. Whereas, though stricken by ill health for several years, Ned S. Creasy was indefatigable in his responsibilities as a family man, as a Christian, as a neighbor, and a public servant. And whereas Ned Creasy completed his earthly sojourn on March 10th, 2018, and was remembered for his many virtues and accomplishments at a funeral service attended by hundreds of Goochland citizens at Goochland High School, and was buried, awaiting, as he affirmed by his faith, the resurrection unto eternal life in Greenwood Memorial Gardens. Now therefore be it resolved that the House of Delegates and the General Assembly hereby note with great sadness the loss of the Honorable Ned S. Creasy, public servant who contributed much to the people of Goochland County and to the great saga of self-government within the Commonwealth of Illinois. And be it resolved further that the clerk of the House of Delegates prepare copies of this resolution for presentation to the family of the Honorable Ned S. Creasy, and also to the office of the County Administrator of Goochland County, with a request that the resolution hang in the office in which the Honorable Ned S. Creasy served so admirably and honorably, as a reminder of the exceptional example of the citizen as public official that he represents for all Virginians.
because of that. The son of Virginia did that. Memory of Ned, and a certificate. And we're sorry for your loss, and thank you for all of his service, and the family as well. Thank you.
Ms. Christie, this was flown over the state capitol on behalf of the Virginia General Assembly House of Delegates. And, you know, I'm also a Navy man myself, and I know that Ned would say there's nothing like teamwork to get things done. And one last of personnel's accomplishments are an example for all of us who serve. And I'm a brand new in politics, and I hope I can live up to his legacy. Thank you.
How about one more round of applause for the priest?
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks again, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is a citizen comment period. It looks like the Creasy family has cleared the room, so unfortunately you won't be able to address them directly, but I'm sure you can pass along your thoughts to them individually. But right now would be a good time. I'll open the citizen comment period. Anyone would like to come forward and address this board on any item of Goochland County business, now would be the time. So thank you.
My name is
I'm sorry, just your name and address, please. That'd be great.
Doug Knapp, 2337 Wheatlands Drive, and I'm up here to also speak on behalf of my wife, Pat Hendy. She's much more articulate than I am, but she's letting me do this. I'm not a very superstitious person, but Friday, April 13th was not a good day for our neighborhood. I got a phone call at about 3:30 in the afternoon from a neighbor indicating to me that I guess you already know the Gooden's house is on fire. I didn't know that. My neighbor told me that the fire was heading in my direction and I ought to get outside very, very quickly, which I did. Pat was not home at the time. I stood outside and watched a fully engaged fire go on for a little while until the fire department came. I witnessed something that day, and I think with Ned Creasy's comments that were just made about his service of 30 years in fire and rescue, I witnessed the hard work of these people. I witnessed it firsthand. I saw people tackle hoses, tackle smoke that was filling my lungs. I could hardly talk because the wind was blowing so heavily that day towards my house that I could barely get by. I saw our firefighters just dive directly into harm's way. I was outside because the wind was so strong. I was watching my own house. We had, I think, 4 fire departments from Goochland County there. I think we had Mannequin, we had the courthouse, we had Centerville, and I think it's Crozier. all were there working incredibly hard. At one point, I looked up at my roof, and my roof was on fire. I immediately ran 2 doors down to where all those fire engines were, and the firemen are waving me back. And I said, "My roof is on fire." And one of the firefighters came up to me and said in an amazingly calm way, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." And they put that fire out. I am so incredibly grateful to Chief McKay. Pat is incredibly grateful to Chief McKay and all of his firefighters. I just wanted to come before all of you to tell you as a citizen of Goochland County how proud I am of what all of you do and what all of our volunteers and our paid employees do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, and don't sell yourself short as being very eloquent. That was very well delivered, so thank you for that. And Chief, did you hear every word of that? Okay, good. Please pass that along to everyone that responded to that fire. So thank you. Citizen comment, anyone else like to come forward? Seeing Mr. Lyle coming forward, I just remind him to name and address and keep it to 3 minutes if it's humanly possible.
Not only is it, it shall be.
kinda good at it.
Mr. Chairman, Jonathan Lyle, 1521 Mannequin Road. I actually hesitated whether or not to share a comment or two tonight, but Mr. Creasy was a get-it-done kind of guy, and he understood that the county's work was going to continue, and I think he had one heck of a legacy. He would sometimes, as all of you do, look at me a bit curiously. I stand here. You'll learn, Mr. Lumpkins, you'll learn. But he certainly exemplified something I would aspire to, and that would be service to this county. And so I am here as a Monacan Soil and Water Conservation Director. I have been sitting here, not tonight, but at previous meetings, as you wrestle with some of the issues the county is facing. Primarily growth is what has primarily been on the agenda the last, I would say, couple of quarters, in the expansion. And one of the things that we monitor at Monacan and through the Soil and Water Conservation Association are those pieces of legislation that the General Assembly impanels or passes that affect soil and water conservation. And I know Mr. Drumright does a really good job in keeping you all abreast, but he may or may not have caught one of the nuances of Senate Bill 211, which was passed by both the Senate and the House. I cannot tell you if the governor has signed it or not, but I do want to share one comment from the paraphrase. This is not the exact flowery conversation or commentary, but it says, "This bill requires the local planning commission to survey and study groundwater and surface water availability, quality, and sustainability in the preparation of a comprehensive plan." Now, they use the word requires. Now, it may say shall, it may say may, but as you all have been looking at some of these developmental issues, one of the things that has been a concern in my mind is we have most of the county on groundwater, on wells. And hydrology reports are not easily acquired. I mean, it's a science, but it's an inexact science. But if this indeed is now part of the Dillon Rule mandate, and that you shall, as the Planning Commission develops comprehensive plans, which are an ongoing heuristic, dynamic process, I think it is important for us to understand what kind of demands we're putting on the groundwater tables as we approve. Some of them are in the Tuckahoe district, but 300 houses here, 500 houses there. After a while, you got yourself Chesterfield County. And so, you know, the issues, I think, are real. And so I would just, again, commend to your attention that Senate Bill 211, in the summary, shall requires the local planning commission. And I know our comprehensive plan, as it gets developed, if there is not a, as they say, to survey and study groundwater and surface water availability, quality, and sustainability in the comprehensive plan, that's that's something I know at Monacan we're interested in, because agriculture uses water. I mean, we're soil and water, and so the water part is important. You don't have water, you don't have crops. You don't have crops, don't have food. You follow the logic there. So that's really my comment, that it's now part of the General Assembly's mandate to locality. So as the comprehensive plan is being developed, water tables, I think, are going to be a requirement. And if there's anything Monacan can do to help, please let us know. We're very appreciative of the partnership that seems to have blossomed. I will digress. Mr. Creasy made a comment when I first started attending the meeting. He says, "We've never had one of you folks here like these meetings before." So I'm not sure if he was bemoaning the fact or if that was a compliment. I couldn't really tell. But I did want to bring that to your attention. It appears that the comprehensive plan requires water surveys, and if you don't have it in the comprehensive plan, let us know if we can help over at Monacan. Still hasn't blinked yet, so I guess I'm under 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Lau. And it sounded like there was a volunteer to help. It's always nice to lend advice, but it's even nicer to lend a hand. Sounds like you're willing to lend a hand, so thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think Mr. Hall said he wasn't sure if it's signed, but it is. I've looked it up, and it was signed by the governor. So.
It's effective July 1st, or? Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so it has been signed, so it'll be effective July 1st. So thereafter, I guess, local governments will be charged with including that consideration in their planning. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. So. Anyone else like to approach in the citizen comment period? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the comment period. Board, the next item on the agenda is our public hearings. The first public hearing was an application filed by Andrew Swift to renew a conditional use permit. I understand that the applicant has requested a deferral, and I believe the deferral was requested was a 60-day deferral to July 3rd, 2018. If we are going to defer it, we'll need to take action to defer. So we'll need a motion to that effect. At this point, I'll entertain. Before I do, Ms. McGee, did you have any comments to make on this application?
We have not had very many deferrals that have occurred without a presentation. Is it the board's practice to take any public comment on the deferral motion, or do you simply make the motion and then vote on it? We haven't had this particular situation come up before, so.
Where the applicants requested the deferral?
Right, without a presentation having already occurred and then a deferral having happened.
Board, what's your pleasure? Do you need a presentation?
Well, the issue is that whether or not to have a public hearing. It was advertised for a public hearing.
Mm-hmm.
The public hearing you thought you were going to have was on the case. But now, instead, you have a deferral before you. And so typically, you might have a public hearing on the deferral because you advertised a public hearing, and that's the only portion of the case that you're going to take action on tonight.
So we have the option now of having a public hearing on the deferral itself, and then if we defer, we'd have the public hearing on the application at a later meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Board, do we want to have a public hearing on the deferral?
Sure.
Is the applicant here? Do you know?
Is the applicant here?
Is the applicant here?
Applicant is not here.
Okay. Okay. All right, it appears that if we.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, super, thank you.
I'll second the motion
Okay, what was the motion again?
Motion to defer.
as
Okay.
requested.
Hearing on the application filed by Andrew Swift.
Is your mic on for the public record there?
Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make the motion that we defer the application by Andrew Swift
Okay, it's been moved to defer.
And you're deferring that to your July meeting?
Correct.
July 3rd.
Defer to the July 3rd meeting.
So it's a 60-day deferral. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, it's been moved to defer the Swift case to July 3rd. It's been seconded. Mr. Badesky, could you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Lashlet?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, that application is deferred till July 3rd. The next item, public hearing that we have is an application filed by Heather Valentine. And do we have a presentation on this application?
Yes.
Great, thank
Good
you.
evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Welcome, Mr. Lumpkins. First public hearing tonight is a renewal of a conditional use permit submitted by Heather Valentine. Property is located in the east end of the county in the Meadows of Manikin or Joe Brook Farm subdivision. The property and all the surrounding properties is designated on the comprehensive plan as rural enhancement area. The property is also in a special area on the comp plan designated as the Deep Run Hunt community. This particular subdivision is zoned RR. All the surrounding properties in the subdivision are zoned RR, and there's A2 to the north of this property. You can see the subdivision here. This is when this property was developed, the RR district had a minimum lot size of 5 acres. So the majority of the lots in this development are built on, and they are all about 5-acre lots. The applicant is requesting this accessory apartment for her elderly father who lives there. He's lived there for the past 10 years since they've got the first permit. This is the home. You cannot see the accessory apartment from the front. It's actually there on the left-hand side. You can see the bump out, and then this is the rear of the apartment for her father. There was a community meeting held on February 28th. No one from the community attended the meeting. No concerns have been identified. Over the 10 years, we've not had any complaints on this property or have any concerns been raised about this request. In response to the county's policy for an expiration date, we do determine that this to be a low-impact use. Since they've had the permit for 10 years with no issues, they've adhered to all the CUP conditions, and we've had no complaints. We would be recommending no expiration date on this, so this use would then run with the land with this property. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 5th. No one spoke during that public hearing, and it was recommended for approval with a 4-0 vote, and one member of the Planning Commission was absent. This is a black line version, so these are the 2007 conditions. The conditions haven't really changed. We just sort of updated them and modified them to meet our standard accessory use or accessory apartment conditions. So the first condition is a use limitation. Only a person or persons related to a resident of the principal dwelling shall use the attached dwelling as a residence. No rental. The second dwelling unit cannot be rented separately from the original dwelling. We do require smoke and carbon monoxide detectors in the second dwelling. Emergency vehicle access shall be provided and maintained. And then our standard transfer of ownership condition was added in there. And then you can see we're removing the condition for the time limit. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Hunter? All right, seeing none, thank you for that presentation. Is the applicant here this evening? Would the applicant like to come forward? And please state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Arthur Kay. My address is 800 Dover Bluff Place, Manikin Sabbath, Virginia, 23103.
Thank you.
I'm the Heather Valentine's husband. I'm her authorized representative.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I don't really have a presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Do we have any questions of the applicant?
Not at this point.
Not at this point?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you very much for coming up.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, we've heard from staff, we've heard from the applicant. I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone who'd like to come forward and speak in favor or in opposition or make comments on this application, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, what's your pleasure? Any questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'd move that we approve the application filed by Heather Valentine to renew the CUP, the two-family dwelling at 800 Dover Bluff Place.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelet?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. It's unanimous. You have your approval. Thank you very much. Next item, Ms. Hunter?
Yes, good evening again. The second item is the first of two conditional use permits be applied for by the Goochland Public Schools. That was a slip.
Doing so good, too.
Yes,
Okay.
this is for Randolph Elementary School, which is located on the east end of the county. The school's located at 1552 Shepherdtown Road. The comprehensive plan designates this property as county-owned property. The property is about 34 acres. The property is zoned A2. A2s do require a conditional use permit for schools, and because they are expanding the school, that is why we have the conditional use permit request before you. You can see they do have 3 trailers already located on this property. At one time, we thought the trailers were going to be a temporary use, and you can have trailers for up to 1 year. But now that they have been here longer than a year, we did ask them to come through the CUP process to bring them into compliance. So each trailer holds 2 classrooms, and they do have their own restroom facilities, and they are served with water and sewer. Community meeting was held on February 28th. There was no citizens attending the meeting. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 5th. No one spoke at the public hearing, and it was approved with a 4-0 vote by the Planning Commission. We are recommending only one condition, and that there be a working smoke detector and a working carbon monoxide monitor installed and maintained in the trailers. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Hunter? No? Thank you for that presentation. And the schools is the applicant here?
We're the applicant, yeah.
Would schools like to come forward and elaborate on anything that was said or add to it?
No, I'm just
Ms.
going to
White?
say thank you very much for considering this application, and I am here to answer any questions for this one and the second one.
Any questions for Ms.
And
White?
I will tell you that your planning department is superb to work with. They're just really great.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, no questions for the applicant. All right, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anybody would like to come forward, speak to this application? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, if there's any additional questions for the applicant or the schools, otherwise I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I move we approve the application by Goochland County Public Schools requesting a CUP for the expansion of the school to include the mobile classrooms at Randolph Elementary.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelet?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, you have the first one. That's unanimous. Thank you. Ms. Hunter, the next one?
Yes. The next public hearing is very similar request, except it's for Byrd Elementary School. Byrd Elementary is located at 2704 Haydensville Fife Road in the western part of the county. This property is also designated on the comprehensive plan as county-owned property. Property is about just under 10 acres. You can see it there. The property is zoned A1. The location of the trailer, there's no trailer at Byrd at this time, but they will be adding it. They have, you can see the loop on the bottom. They have since reworked this access since the aerial photo was taken. This is the new access for this, for the drop-off. It allows some circulation for them to drop students and keep things moving. The trailers would be located here, so it would be located just adjacent to the school here, and then this is the new layout for the parking area. This would be on a well and septic, and again, 2 classrooms per trailer. just like at just like at Randolph. Again, the community meeting was held on this one also with no citizens attending, no one speaking at the public hearing at the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission did approve it with a 4-0 vote. Same condition that was recommended with the Randolph, that they would have a working smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. I'll be happy to answer any questions on this one.
Any questions for Ms. Hunter? Nope, thank you for that. Maybe the schools can just keep your seat. Is there any questions for the schools? Saved you a trip. So. Bless you. Okay, so we've heard from staff and the applicant. I'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone would like to come forward and speak to this application? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, unless there's no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I move we approve the application filed by Gushing County Public Schools requesting a CUP for the expansion of schools to include mobile trailer at Byrd Elementary.
Okay, it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded and thirded. Mr. Badesky, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lumpkin.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. You have your approval for that one as well. The next item on the agenda is a proposed sale of a piece of property, and Mr. Ryan, you will be walking us through this application.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Badesky, Matthew Ryan, Director of Economic Development. I'm here tonight to ask for the request to sell county-owned property, also known as the Fairgrounds Lot at 2744 Fairground Road, Goshen County, Virginia. So the parcel we're discussing tonight, again, 2744 Fairgrounds Road. The tax parcel is 4210790. Current owner of record is Goshen County. We are looking at 3.162 acres, currently zoned B1, which is general business, and the current real estate assessment of $811,400. So we had an independent appraisal requested by the county in January of 2017. This appraisal was prepared by William Barber, dated January 31st of 2017. This appraisal was prepared in conformity with the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, and a current market value of $850,000 was assigned. Also, the highest and best use determined was commercial development. So just a brief purchase summary. We received an unsolicited letter of intent approximately of April of 17, although there were discussions prior to that with the potential purchaser. That purchaser is Chase Development Company, Incorporated, or assigns 208 North Garnet Street, Suite G, Henderson, North Carolina. Also to note that Chase Development currently owns the Food Lion Shopping Center adjacent to this parcel. The purchase price of $850,000 to be paid in cash at closing, a due diligence period of 270 days with 2 90-day extensions, and the development will be required to adhere to the courthouse overlay district standards, taking into consideration architectural elements, buffering, screening, building materials, etc. The purchaser agrees to provide all necessary utility easements and right-of-way dedications for future infrastructure improvements. Obviously, we are currently undertaking a roundabout project in this very area that has been discussed with the purchaser, and they are aware. We have written into the contract a small piece of up to 0.25 of an acre that will be allowed for that dedication of that right-of-way. Also, the purchaser agrees to work in good faith with the existing businesses compatible to the potential tenants of the new development. Again, they are the current owner of record of the Food Lion Shopping Center. While no potential users have been identified, all current B1 zoning uses would be allowed with the exception of shooting ranges or fuel transfer stations. Current B1 uses that could be considered retail, restaurant, bank, convenience store, medical clinic, dry cleaners, farmer markets, etc. There are current covenants, conditions, and restrictions that apply to the property and its potential uses. So next steps, again, tonight we're asking for board action, contract negotiated, ratified. The due diligence period would commence 270 days to an outlying date of 450 days. The roundabout, staff will continue to work with VDOT relating to the planned roundabout and the right-of-way required. Right now, we're hoping for a June date to get that initial engineered plans. Any potential impacts relating to the right-of-way acquisition have been addressed in the purchase contract. Then a plan of development would be submitted, engineering, transportation, drainage, stormwater. The design review committee, per the courthouse overlay design standards, which would cover lighting, building materials, design, landscaping, buffers, fencing, et cetera. Then the property transfer would occur, and then construction permitting. So again, the action requested, we are requesting to authorize the county administrator to execute a contract for the sale of tax parcel number 4210790 to Chase Development Company or Signs for the development of a retail facility. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and also the potential purchaser is here as well if you have questions for them.
Thank you for that presentation, Mr. Ryan. I guess you were serving in both the staff and the bringing the proposal position. Do we have any questions for Mr. Ryan at all? No? Okay. The potential purchaser here is here as well?
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure whether, with the potential purchaser, thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Yep.
Would you like to come forward at all, or it's your option? There's no requirement to come forward, but if you'd like to. Okay, are there any questions for the potential? Okay, maybe a little premature for that. Yes, sir. Sure.
I know I talked to Mr. Palmore, John Hopkins, good evening. On page 9 of the contract, under E3, just one question, we touched on it yesterday, thank you for calling me about the easement. This section is called seller's required actions, but in paragraph 3 of there's a purchaser obligation that I want to make sure that I understand your understanding of the purchaser's obligation in that paragraph. The section, the paragraph reads, the property currently has electrical power lines that run from Sandy Hook or 522 across the back. If you go by there, you can see it on an aerial. I think you and I talked, it would be great to remove that. And it appears that serves the fire station right next door to the property and no other property, which is county. So if we can eliminate that power lines, that's great. So the seller agrees to cooperate in that effort. But the important part here, or the part I want to make sure I understand, is the cost of said relocation will be borne by the purchaser. So what I'm envisioning looking at the property is we're going to have power going down the south side of Fairground Road. I think we're going to be enhancing that because of an animal shelter that's a mile or so down the road. Preliminary information that staff has provided is that line would have enough power, or have a capacity that it could cross Fairground Road in front of the fire station and provide power to the fire station. So if that can be worked out, that seems great, and it would be able to remove, not just maybe bury that line there, but it would remove the easement. And I just want to make sure your understanding of the paragraph is that if we were able to accomplish something like that, that would be, you would be paying for the power to go across Fairground to the fire station.
I think that's language that's effectively stated by what you've just summarized. Of course, the practical issue, of course, is how expensive will it be to run a new line from across the street to service the fire department and the equipment that you have, behind that. Of course, we would want to try to do that in the most cost-effective manner. So if, for instance, if they say, well, if it's overhead, it's X $1,000, but if it's underground, it's going to be 3 times as much. Obviously, we would want you to accept an overground position relative to the power change. But that's our intent. We want to explore that jointly with you. I believe the language is such that we will approach that jointly with the power company and see where that goes. But yes, I think your statement is accurate.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer, since you did respond to a question, if you wouldn't mind, if I could indulge me to name your name and who you represent in the microphone, I appreciate that.
Palomar, President of Chase Development Company.
John Palomar, Vice President of Chase Development Company.
Great, thank you so much for that, just since that'll be a part of the official record, so thank you. Are there any other questions for Chase Development or Mr. Palmore? It is a little premature for some of these questions, but I appreciate your being here to address any questions that we might have. So thank you so much. Okay, any other questions for staff or Mr. Ryan on this? If not, okay, we'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone would like to come forward and speak on this proposal? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. So this is a proposal to authorize the county administrator to execute a contract of sale.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board of Supervisors authorize Mr. Badesky to execute what is now an offer and turn it into a contract for the sale of tax parcel number 42-1-0-79-0 to Chase Development Company or its assigns.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. You have your authorization, Mr. County Administrator. Thank you for being here tonight. Next item, Mr. Kidoff. This is our secondary six-year plan. Yeah. Come on now. Just trying to make it exciting and keep us awake. Okay, good. Nice. Great, great, thank you.
If you recall, last month, we presented the list that we have, the priorities and updates on projects. Tonight is the public hearing portion of that. For the public's benefit, we figured it would be nice to have in here a little bit of background on what the SSYP is, the secondary six-year plan. It's an annually reviewed plan to address our secondary road network. It addresses items such as safety improvements, rural additions, unpaved roads, sidewalks, things of that nature. It also prioritizes our projects, and it allows VDOT, with that prioritization, to allocate funds to each project. And we work very closely with them, specifically at this time of the year. We work all year with them on the plan, but it's more intense this time of year because this is when the funding streams start to change, the dollars start to change as we allocate to each project. As mentioned last month, this is just a redundant slide here. The CTB, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, has added funds to the unpaved road program, which is shown at a chart later in the presentation. And also as a refresher, we did complete 3 projects last year, 2 by VDOT and 1 by a developer. And this year there's 5 projects on the books. Also mentioned last month, just like with any construction project, there are costs that we have to keep in mind. And a lot of these projects have constrained costs on them, so we're always keeping that in mind, working diligently with VDOT on those items. And the number did change a little bit, not from the last presentation, but from last year. It's, as mentioned in April, it's $74,185 per year. That is also in the chart later in the presentation. And this is also new to us, is the funds not spent on these projects will roll into the Smart Scale program. So therein lies why we work as hard as we do with VDOT to make sure that we don't fall into that category of lose any funds that we could have used for something. Next few slides are just updates on projects. And again, this is redundant from April. The Fairground Road and Sandy Hook intersection, we're really kind of talking about 2 projects here. It's the roundabout portion, which is the intersection, and then an extension of the roundabout to River Road and River Road improvements. For that project, the roundabout is $3.6 million. No cost to the county. It's fully funded by the state. There's a little stub road to the Exxon station that's in the back. Actually, let me go back to the map here. You can see that in the middle of the Exxon access. The good news with this is that with any project, you have an engineering portion and a construction portion. Engineering is usually around 10 to 12% of the cost of the project. VDOT is taking that cost and wrapping it into the roundabout portion, so it's at no cost to us. And another way to look at it is about $45,000 in savings if you want to look at it around 10% margin, but we are responsible for the construction portion, which is $455,000, and that's been presented before. And the extension portion of it, $3.9 million, that's 50/50. It's a revenue share program that VDOT has. We're still waiting to hear back on their portion of that, which off the top of my head, I think was $1.55 million. So as soon as we hear from them, we'll let you know. Another update is the Patterson Avenue River Road intersection. It's the northbound right turn lane. We were curious when VDOT was going to have that in the books, or when they would need the Benedictine prep bond money, which I think was around $130,000. They have since contacted us, and they said they wanted to call on that bond and go ahead and move forward with doing the project. So we're very excited about that. And as it moves forward, we'll keep you updated. And then the Maidens Road Bridge project is just a simple deck rehabilitation project. It's about $130,000. The 5 projects slated for this year, as mentioned in the previous slide: Soldiers Lodge Road, Pink Dogwood Road, B Road, Martin Road, and Blue Top Road. And Martin Road was one of the completed projects, but it wasn't the entire road. The developer was only responsible for doing his portion up to near the end of the road. It was about another extra 900 feet. VDOT said, hey, let's add this to the list. We have the money, so let's go ahead and do it. So we're excited about that as well. So that way the whole VDOT portion of the road will be paid. Just a quick map showing where those roads are: Martin, Breach Hop, Pink Dogwood, Lee, and Soldiers Lodge. If you recall, last month, VDOT requested out of this list of remaining public gravel roads, Flag Station Road and Youngstown Road to be taken from this list and added to our priority list. At 12 this afternoon, we were told that Flag Station Road should not be added to that list. Not only that, but it should be removed from the program altogether. So our first concern was, why? If we have something in a program and we're being asked to take it from the program and prioritize it, but now we're being asked to remove it from the program altogether, it didn't really make sense. But there's good news with this. The project is still being done. VDOT just said they can actually do it out of their maintenance funds. So that it has $25,000 allocated to it. That $25,000 rolls back into our SSYP money. So the project's still going to get done, and we also have $25,000 left over. So this is a change from what's in the board resolution, and I spoke with Ms. McGee about how to address that. So if adopted tonight, it would be adopted as amended, which would be removing Flag Station Road from the resolution. Again, we just found out about that at noon today. So to the priority list, again, we added Flag Station Road and Youngstown to the bottom. So those are the only changes. Flag Station Road is actually being removed and it'll be adopted as amended. And then the last slide we have is the actual estimated allocations, the cost allocations from VDOT. All of them are concerns of ours. We look at them with VDOT regularly. Really, the 74,000 number you can see there in the tele fee, and that's the one that we focus on the most. But all the numbers are important to us. And we actually just got the latest updated chart, which the good news is it actually matches what you see on your screen there. I didn't mean that to be a joke. So any questions? I actually have a VDOT rep here, David Baden in the back. He's been great to work with. Really appreciate all he's done for us. As a matter of fact, he's the one that's solely devoted to making sure that these projects move forward and are completed on time. So we appreciate that. Any questions?
Let's get off that 25,000. Do we need to allocate that, or it just rolls down to the next priority? How does that 25,000 get treated?
It goes back into the pot, but it can't be used for any of these projects because they are not part of. They actually don't have enough vehicles per day. There's a few nuances to why it couldn't be used in one of these projects, but it'd be rolled back into the pot, and we would have to do a little research to find out if there's any roads that could be allocated to.
Okay, so at this point this evening, we're not being asked to allocate that 25 to another project, but at some point we may be asked to do that once we identify a project that's eligible.
And we're going to be working through that to see what projects we have.
It doesn't get swept away with as unused funds. Okay. Questions for Mr. Kilduff at this point?
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Just edification for the new fellows. When I see unpaved roads, is that the same as the rustic road program?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rural rustic.
Rural rustic. Rural rustic. Yeah, I was reading about that earlier and making sure I'm just thinking about it.
It's
Rural rustic sounds better. Rural rustic, yeah.
It's one of the 45,000 pockets of money that, you know, you have to search through to get to the.
Little
yeah,
pockets.
Little tiny pocket. Other questions for Mr. Kodoff? Ms. LaSalette?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I meant to ask this last month, and I didn't, so I apologize for that. On the Fairground Road project, we've got the roundabout, we have the little extension stub, then we extend Fairground Road to Route 6. And so what is the Route 6 work? Why, I thought the project was going to stop at Route 6. I did mean to ask last month. It's turn lanes?
You're answering it.
Go right ahead.
It's, so extending over to River Road would require improvements based on, what that Fairground Road extension would do. If you see some turn lanes on there that don't currently exist.
Okay.
And also, just to keep in mind, this is a high-level sketch, so when you see that, sorry for me, River Road that goes from almost towards the high school.
Yes.
Almost towards the track.
Yes.
It may not totally look like that, it may be shorter, it might be a little bit longer, because this was just a high-level sketch.
Yeah, because it seemed like a long way.
It does seem like a long way. It may actually be that long when it's all said and done, but it has not been designed yet at all.
But that's not like adding more lanes or anything, or actual lanes,
Well-
travel lanes, and turn lanes.
You'll have to add a storage lane?
Right. Okay, good. Thank
have
you.
to add-
I'd meant to ask before. I appreciate that.
If
Go right
I may
ahead.
add to that, Mr. Chairman, is there going to be a median in that spot? Or just markings? Okay.
Sorry, Tom Cohen, principal planner. Yeah, there will be a middle lane added for a left turn lane and a right turn lane, but there'll be some transitions, because there'll be some transitions before you get to turn lanes. So some of that might be as simple as restriping part of the road, but there will be a middle lane added for left turn movements onto the new roadway.
Okay. And that would be all pulling off county property on the north side of Route 6?
Correct, on the all county properties,
Right.
either in right of way or county property.
All county property. Good answer. Thank you.
No eminent domain.
Manny, get his
Other
question. Did you get
questions?
the question?
No, no, he answered.
No median then.
No median, just lines,
Striping.
restriping.
Other questions?
Okay. Nope.
No? Thank you, Mr. Kodoff. And you served as both the county staff member and the bringer of the proposal for the second-year plan. So we will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone that would like to come forward and speak to the secondary six-year plan, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Is there any other questions, board? If not, I'll be happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
move that we adopt the secondary six-year plan for fiscal year 2019 to 2024 as presented.
And then also the budget priorities for
And amended.
2019?
That's right.
And that's as amended by Mr.
As
Kilduff.
amended. As amended.
As amended. So the proposal is to go ahead and adopt the secondary six-year plan for 2019 to 24 and the budget priorities for 2019 as amended, as presented. That's the motion. Is that the motion?
Well, and also authorize the county administrator to execute any necessary documents related to the
Okay, great.
SSYP.
Great.
Second.
Thank you, Betty.
Been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. LaChalette?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. It's unanimous. You have your approval. We have the adoption. Next item on the agenda. Whit, are you going to walk us through this one?
Yes.
An ordinance amendment?
Ordinance amendments, yeah.
Test, it's working.
Fun down there.
Because he didn't want to listen to Todd.
You can connect that to Wi-Fi.
All right, good evening. As you know, I'm Whit Marshall, the Assistant County Attorney. I'm bringing before you some proposed amendments to our zoning ordinance and as they relate to plans of development. As you're well aware, we've been dealing a lot on the front end with applicants with residential development. You've done your capital impact model to help streamline that process to go through. As part of that process, the next step is when they start developing the property and going through it. So what we've done is compared our ordinance to our current practice and policies and found some discrepancies. So these proposals all would remedy that. Also, an important thing to note is that nothing proposed this evening would be different from, would change anything for any applicant coming through with a residential development, a residential subdivision, other than what's currently there. So there won't be any changes from the applicant's perspective. As y'all are probably aware, Plan of Development, I've abbreviated it POD here. It's required for all significant development in the county. It's a useful tool that's been given to us by the General Assembly to enable us to make sure that all of the various laws, regulations, all those different parts come together and that the projects that we approve and move forward are compliant. You can see it also protects water quality, traffic safety, and also design and construction standards. The purpose of these three amendments, as I mentioned earlier, is to clarify what types of development will require a POD and when required improvements must be constructed and completed. And that's so, because as you know, subdivisions aren't built overnight. Sometimes you have up to a decade build out, assuming no more recessions. The first change is for section 18.2 in the zoning ordinance. This is where all of the uses requiring a POD are listed. We discovered in going through this, people have been doing the PODs for these developments. However, we realized it was not listed in the ordinance, so this would add that. The language would be that all subdivisions comprised of more than 2 single-family lots that require any improvements to be made for access or public safety. So it's not just with the ties. The POD deals a lot with timing and other things for residents to be reached, roads and typically fire protection measures. So if a subdivision, if those improvements are required, then they would need to do a POD so we can make sure all the timing is correct and that everything proceeds legally. Do y'all have any questions about this particular change?
Any questions so far?
No?
All right, let's go to number 2. This one gets a little more exciting. So the purpose of 18.10, the purpose of this proposed change is it codifies when and to what extent certain improvements must be installed. Again, we're talking about roads, hydrants, street signs, fire protection turnarounds, things along those lines. Also want to emphasize that these requirements are driven by the developer. They've moved forward with their development, they reach a certain stage, and then they have to make sure that certain things are in place before. So the developer drives this process. The county isn't saying within 6 months you have to do this. It's based on how fast they would like to go, based on their finances and the market, et cetera. The first change is to clarify with the issuance of a building permit for a single-family home in the subdivision, when that can be and what needs to be constructed. For a building permit to be issued, the subdivision entrance and turn lane close to the building site have to be constructed. As you can see, it's a lesser course. It's not completely finished, but you have the base course pavement stage. Depending on the plan of development, will have detailed plans as to what types of pavement. They're different ones, but this is a lower level, so this isn't requiring them to have it all bells and whistles out there for this part of the stage. This is just when they're getting started in building. Also, the roads to the building site must also be constructed to that same base course stage and or layer depending on the plans. And also temporary street signage also needs to be in place. That way if fire rescue or just county staff or anyone's trying to locate things, that temporary signage is allowed. So these are kind of flexible standards. They're overseen by the POD administrator, and she's here if you have any specific, more technical questions. She's available to answer those. Do y'all have any questions about this portion? All right, the next one is, I've just called it the 50% rule, but once you have building permits that have been issued for half the homes on the plan, and this will be the whole layout of the subdivision, it may be a phase of a subdivision, but once half have building permits, all of the required improvements must be completed before you begin the second half of the development. This is how our developments are currently done, and that's just to ensure that we're getting the required improvements constructed.
I do have a kind of a question about that. Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead, yep.
So, Ms. Marshall, this would have made sure that by the time I moved into my house in my neighborhood, there would have been a dry hydrant installed.
Absolutely. Part
which
of what
hasn't been installed yet.
Yes, part of what the POD administrator will check, in addition to your ordinances, state laws, storm, all that stuff, they also will check proffers are ordinances that govern the property as well. And his dry hydrant was a proffer condition, so that would be addressed.
Ms. Marshall, a follow-on question on that. It says, once half the home's on the plan. If a developer is phasing in and they have 10 phases, how would that work?
Each phase, depending on their size, but each phase would be its own subdivision, so they can be done individually. So it's not if you have, let's say, 5 phases and you're 2.5 through, you have to do the back 2.5 of the phases. It would be within a phase or within a smaller development. Each of those phases in like Kenlock, each one is its own little subdivision.
Okay, and then the common areas, how would they be treated?
Common areas that are associated on, the plan of development will be for that unit, so common areas that are within that unit would need to be, but these improvements we're talking about are turn lanes, fire protection, roads, and signs. So things like
Okay.
clubhouse or
Amenities.
amenities, those would be different, I believe. Is that correct, Debbie? Yes.
And when would those be required? Am I jumping ahead? I don't mean to jump ahead on the presentation, but,
Spoiler alert.
yeah, right, exactly.
Debbie, our POD administrator.
Debbie.
If they would be done in whatever phase they're shown to be in. So if they didn't show it till phase 3, that's when that would be constructed, because those are amenities, they're not what we consider life safety measures.
So all the common areas and all the amenities would be required to be included in one of the phases. So you couldn't do the 10 phases of residential without doing any of the common areas?
Correct. Usually each phase has its own share of common area, and then the amenities may or may not be in common area, or they may be on their own lot. It just depends. Different developments do it different ways. But everything within that section, like if you do section 1, section 2, section 3, everything shown within section on that subdivision plat would have to fall under the requirements for this.
50% rule. Obviously, one of the concerns is to build all the homes and don't build the common areas and the amenities. And I just wondered at what point in the development cycle that those would be required, if they're required last on the last phase or on the last
Now,
plan.
The only way they'd be required is if they'd been proffered, because
Okay.
open space doesn't require activities.
Sure.
But if they've proffered something that this board has accepted, then it's an ordinance, in which case you would have the authority to, she and the building inspector may withhold permits if they aren't making certain improvements.
Okay, so if it's not proffered, then there's no
It's
real
a
requirement.
business decision.
Okay.
Well, open space is a little different. Amenities are different, and typically they are proffered. There's nothing in the zoning ordinance that per se requires a certain amenity.
Okay.
The zoning ordinance does, and certain zoning districts require a certain percentage of open space, and
Right.
that would absolutely be required and checked as we go through.
And
Great.
it's typically going to be
Thank you.
acreage, so
Yes. Great.
it doesn't require construction.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Other questions? Waiting to say.
Let me just,
Yes,
let
ma'am.
me just follow up on that.
Sure.
Okay, so you've got, just let's say you've got 5-unit subdivision, just a small subdivision, minor, whatever you call it. Okay, so a small subdivision, it's supposed to have, well, 5 probably doesn't make any sense, but that subdivision is supposed to have a clubhouse, and the clubhouse is proffered.
Yes.
Does this come into play?
It comes into play with the POD and the requirements for the plating and that, but it doesn't come into play as the requirements based on this 50%.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
All right, so these 50% are just your safety, so roads, signs, and, I'm reminding myself, roads, signs, and fire protection.
That was exciting.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm glad. Let's
Getting
do
warmed up.
this.
All right.
All right, so there's a little more in 18.10. As you know, some of your larger developments have multiple entrances. It requires that all the entrances be completed either before the issuance of the 50th building permit or building permits for 50% of the homes shown on the plans. And also, we have added phased developments, which should answer your question with regard to like Kinlock parts 1 through 12, or however many there are now. Do y'all have any questions on this page? Good.
Okay.
All right. Last but certainly not least, we're down to where people are going to occupy the homes. We're talking about certificates of occupancy and the required improvements before those are issued. As we've discussed before, subdivisions have a very long construction span, so some homes may be occupied before the remainder of the subdivision is completed. The certificate of occupancy is issued once the structure is completed. Staff is ensured that the dwelling is in compliance with all the applicable laws, regulations, and ordinances. The POD administrator has to sign off before the certificate of occupancy can be issued, and this is your final check done before it can be occupied by actual residents who are our taxpayers. And so as they're now going to be occupied, this is where we're going to step up the requirements with regard to safety and transportation. So the purpose is, I think I already must ensure all access. Okay, so the county has to ensure that all access and fire protections improvements are in place, 100% in place before someone is living in a home. So this requires that the nearest entrance and turn lane be completed. It requires roads going to whichever lot is requesting the certificate of occupancy, that those be completed to the farthest property line beyond that. Permanent signs are installed, and any fire protection, be it hydrants, turnarounds, et cetera, from that entrance to that lot are completed. So we have a safe structure that's already been checked by the POD administrator, the building inspector, everybody's checked it before it's occupied by actual residents. And that's the final part of the certificate of occupancy. Do y'all have any questions on the certificate of occupancy bit?
Members of the board, Whit's done a very good job taking you through the steps and the individual pieces and explaining that this, of course, has already been the current policy. I just want to provide you the perspective that actually putting this in our ordinance and making sure that these occur should prevent a good number of the incomplete roads that we were left with from the recession timeframe. These are designed to make sure the developers doing some things, making sure that the roads are getting improved before our citizens are living there. So it is, again, while consistent with current policy, this is would be ordinance and would be to prevent some of the situations we found ourselves in with citizens on roads that are not complete and not accepted. So
Absolutely. The ideal for this
Good.
is to provide flexibility, developer-driven timing, while also protecting future residents.
Okay, so we're moving policy to the ordinance because we've had some experience in the past that suggests it's a good idea.
Just get everybody on the same page, so when those developers start shooting through, we're ready.
Don't go away because I have
Yes,
a
sir.
question, Mr. Chairman.
Right ahead.
So related to the CO, how does this work with the 50% rule? If the home is built and you get a CO, do they have to complete all the fire hydrant
All of that,
up to the house? Or
correct, up to and including that lot, so up to the furthest property line
so
from
if
the
fire hydrant
entrance.
was supposed to be down the road a little bit,
That would not
would
be
not apply.
implicated. That's my understanding.
If the fire is in phase 2.
She just said no.
They have to have the fire protection in place. So they may not have to have, the road may be paved to the furthest extent of the lot, but the road from there to the fire hydrant, say if it's 2 lots down, they would still have to have the base codes and code and the road be passable, and the fire would be able to access all those features. And they would have to be operational, but you may not have to build the actual road that last little distance, but it would have to be absolutely open for use and usable.
That makes sense.
Does that clarify?
totally.
Okay.
Questions? Yeah, sure.
Make sure I'm following up. Did the planning commission review this?
Yes, sir.
And they voted to approve it, looks like 4-0, I'm reading the right thing. right?
That's correct.
Just indulge me, if we will, what kind of things get reviewed by the planning commission? Ordinance changes, all ordinance changes?
Zoning and subdivision ordinance changes will go through. Things that are just in the regular code do not pass through the planning commission.
Zoning and
And subdivision ordinance, yes, sir.
Okay, and so it's, I think, I thought it was important to note that they're recommending these as well.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So that's the zoning cases, like the ones we've heard earlier with the SWIFTs, and so those go through the planning commission, and then ordinance changes for subdivision and both go through the commission, required by law.
But you mentioned these are our policies and we're just moving them into the ordinance. Is there anything in here that is new, that was not what we've been doing as a matter of practice? Is there anything?
You're the
There's nothing
practitioner.
net new here. It's a lot, so I just want to make sure what we're,
No, we purposely did this to identically mimic what the ordinance, past policy was.
Okay.
And the policy had been in effect since June of 2009, so
2009.
So it isn't a new policy.
There's
It's-
nothing net new here. We're not tightening things up. We're just saying, look, we've been doing it all along. We'll put it in the ordinance to put some teeth behind it. And
The one exception is that first one that I showed you where we added the two families with the required fire or access improvements. That is an addition to the ordinance, although in practice, we've required all of those to have PODs, and people have just been doing it. So that would be a technical change, but not in practice.
not practice.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's a lot here. I just want to see if there's any, what we're doing for net new versus just simply, okay, great, thank you for that, appreciate it. Other questions at this point? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone who'd like to come forward and speak to this item, now would be the time.
Jonathan Lyle, 1521 Mannequin Road. I have been reading some of this, and I want to be attentive to, I guess it's 5.4 under 18.2, Article 21, where it says agribusiness uses that meet the requirements set forth in Section 18A.2, and this is the word, may submit a rural plan of development. But this all comes under the following uses require a plan of development. And so may, but require, and it's agribusiness. So Soil and Water Conservation is very interested in this, what is may and what is required. And I don't know, because I don't have 18A.2 in front of me, what those requirements set forth in 18A.2. So
I'm
Ms. McGee,
happy
would
to
you
be
like to
able to
address
respond,
that, please?
Mr. Lyle. Yes,
Thank you.
and that is,
Thank you.
first of all, that's not part of what's being changed. So you're just asking about current ordinance language.
you
But
know, mays and shalls.
this whole thing says you're required to have a plan of development, but an agribusiness is allowed to have a rural plan of development. That's a subtype. A type of plan of development actually has less requirements because it's for rural. So it is required to have a plan of development, but it can do a rural plan.
So it may do
It's an easier.
an alternate plan.
Well, easier's better. That's
Yes.
good. I'm all for,
Yep.
I'm for easy.
Mr. Chairman, I can add
Yes,
to
sir.
that.
Yeah.
That was something that came out of our Rural Economic Development Committee
Dude.
as a proposal to make it easier for farmers so they can doodle on a napkin and turn it in.
technical
And
term,
that's,
doodle?
that's very helpful. It's just I did not have the 18A.2 in front of me, and my phone's not as smart as me, or well, I'm not as smart as my phone. I couldn't look it up. So I just saw
Good
may,
question.
and I saw shall, and there you go, and I'm done. Thank you.
A great
Mr. Lau, thank you for that. It's a great question.
And just for the record,
Yes,
at
sir.
no time this evening did the red light blink while I was up here.
It's broken.
Duly noted. Despite all that, there is no carryover provision, so it's use it or lose it, so. Just, oh, gosh. Okay, anyone else like to come forward and speak on this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Oh, we have to,
Whoops,
you need a motion?
we need a motion. Why don't we do a motion first?
Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion?
I move to adopt the amendments to County Ordinance Article 21, Section 18, as presented and discussed.
As presented and discussed. So it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. What do we do next? A roll call. Mr. Badesky, would you
Ms.
roll call
Lachelle.
vote, please?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes, thank you. It's unanimous. That's carried. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you, Whit. The next item, Ms. Hunter, would you like to come forward? Talk to us about another ordinance amendment?
Yes. Good evening again, Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. The final public hearing tonight is also an ordinance amendment for a change to the zoning ordinance dealing with the definition of home occupation. The purpose of this ordinance amendment would be to delete the provision under the home occupation definition that allows the rental of rooms to tourists. This term, rental of rooms to tourists, could be applied to short-term rentals of 30 days or less. When the ordinance was adopted in 1968, I don't think they were thinking about short-term rentals, but it could fall under this category. So this would be a cleanup. As it's written right now, because it's in the home occupation, that you can have the rental of rooms. You could then do short-term rentals in any residentially zoned district regardless of the lot size. The rental of rooms to tourists is not similar to the other home occupation uses, which are typically professional offices such as a legal or engineering or architectural office that's within an existing dwelling unit. There is a provision that says no display is permitted and no employees are allowed. And what that implies is that it's supposed to be a very low-impact use with not people coming and going on the property in residential areas. Some of the background on this is how we have regulated short-term rentals or transient occupancy in the past is we have regulated them as bed and breakfasts. Those are currently CUP uses in the A1 and A2 district. So with this one, we did bring this forward to eliminate it, and eliminate this from the home occupation, and we were going to consider just all short-term rentals as a bed and breakfast use. At that time, we brought that to the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. This did go to the Planning Commission in December of 2017. The Planning Commission, no one spoke at the Planning Commission public hearing, and the Planning Commission did forward it to the board. When we brought this to the board, we did have 3 people who spoke during the public hearing that was held in January. While they were raising some concerns, it didn't really apply to them, but it did get us thinking that perhaps this wasn't the correct way to deal with short-term rentals. So the board directed staff to go back and look at short-term rentals as a comprehensive use. We were sort of doing a Band-Aid, and the board said, no, come back and look at it cohesively and in a wider manner. So we've done considerable research since that January meeting. We benchmarked other localities in the region and how they're dealing with short-term rentals. We've also got some information from the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission, who did some research on short-term rentals for the Virginia Tourism Board. Got some great ideas from their document that they put out. So earlier today, we asked the board to refer a zoning amendment on short-term rentals and transient lodging, holistic ordinance amendment, to be referred to the Planning Commission. So that would go to the Planning Commission in June, and that amendment would come to the Board of Supervisors for a public hearing in July. With that proposed amendment, that would look at short-term rentals holistically, but we would still request that you remove it from the home occupation. It is not the right area to look at it, and we believe that the ordinance that we're bringing forward to you in July would be a better way to address that. This short-term rental. So right now, what this would do is just be eliminating from the home occupation definition, the rental of rooms to tourists. It would make any other changes to the home occupation, so you could still have office uses and things like that, just not short-term rentals under this process. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Ms. Hunter? Okay, thank you for that presentation. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone would like to come forward and speak to this? Now would be the time.
1521. I really want to compliment Ms. Hunter and the work that is going through on this. The shared economy is here, and Airbnb and vacation rental by owner is just, it's a reality. And in the tourism arena, we see the yin and the yang, where some folks are benefiting greatly from it, and then you'll have the Virginia Beach and the Williamsburg areas, which are being cannibalized and really harmed by it. As I said, when this first got on the radar, I guess it was last year, I appreciate the sort of the Gordian knot that you all are dealing with. I'm a big property rights person. I believe if you own some property, you should be able to do what you would like to do with your property, as long as you aren't encroaching on someone else. And so I appreciate the cleanup that's going on here. I look forward to seeing what the comprehensive, non-Band-Aid but holistic approach is to the shared economy with short-term rentals. It is part of what the economy is in tourism. There are people that actually plan vacations only using short-term rentals. They don't want the corporate hotel environment. But it does not take much of a search engine to find out fraternity parties, people actually losing their lives. There have been concerns in the Williamsburg area of human trafficking because it's been easy to get a hold of some of these properties. So bless you, Ms. Hunter, for tackling this. I appreciate that this is coming out of that part of the ordinance. But my gosh, the other part of me is we sure got a lot of stuff on the books that makes it hard just to live your life, don't we? I mean, you know, there's just every time you turn around, you got to find something that's telling you you can or you can't. And I am going to regress back to the earlier public hearing because the light did flash this time. But why'd we get rid of duplexes, but we kept triplexes in there as to what you're allowed to do? I just kind of found it curious. You took duplexes out, but you left triplexes in back there. It's way up at the top there. When agribusiness was allowed to do its thing, may do something, but up there you took duplexes out. Just something I noticed after I sat back down. Otherwise, I'd have mentioned it. So, but back to get rid of the occupational thing. Bless you for what you're doing. It's important, but man, we sure got to chase a lot of rabbits to get it kind of all simple, don't we? Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Lyle. I'm just
I'm happy to answer any questions.
trying to, yeah. I know. Trying to sort through whether that was in favor or in opposition of the proposal. I'm sure it was in there somewhere. Compliment for staff.
Mr. Chairman.
We did see the red light. That means you can go and eat potato chips.
Inside joke.
Yeah. Anyone else like to come forward at the public hearing? Yes, ma'am. Come on forward. Name and...
I'm Debbie White. I'm a transient person in this community. So I don't have an address, and I'm trying to figure out what options I have now when I want to live here in the community. I have used Airbnbs, and I've lived with people that are not my relatives in a room in their home. So I am looking again in June to figure out what I can do to live in this community that does not have any hotels, does not have any apartments. You know, so we're starting to shut the door for maybe some legitimate, you know, types of living arrangements that don't fit the norm. And so I'm curious. I mean, I know we've sort of got this bed and breakfast classification now, but I'm not sure that if I were to room with somebody in the community, that you haven't somewhat shut the door for me to do it legitimately. So that's my concern.
Okay, well, super. Thank you for bringing that concern forward. Let's see if we can maybe take a cut at some of that. What we're talking about here really only addresses short-term rentals, which would be 30 days or less. So
Yes, well, I
30
can tell you, I've stayed in every bed and breakfast we have in Goochland in the last 5 years, so I can tell you what they're like. It has helped me, but I'm not sure what I have now.
Well, again, this would be just short-term, so if a 31 or 60 or 90 or 6-month rental, those would not be covered by the short-term rental. We also do have apartments, as you know. We've got one developed, completed, one in process. We also have the first ever hotel coming to Goochland, so there'll be at some point, it doesn't help you tonight, but are there other, Ms. McGee, would you like to add to that or take away from that, or Ms. Hunter?
can probably answer some.
So right now, the way the code works and way we were interpreting the code is that on any of these short-term rentals, we were saying they were CUPs in the A1 and the A2. As we've done our holistic approach, we were looking at it, and we were actually increasing where people can do short-term rentals and do it by right if they live in the home. So we were, with the ordinance that's coming forward to the board, it would actually increase the opportunity for homeowners to rent rooms for transient lodging.
So rather than restrict or limit, we are looking to expand.
We're going in the opposite
Yeah,
direction,
we're going in the
yes.
opposite direction, so. All right, good, thank you for that.
We're trying to reduce the hurdles.
Yes, that's a great thing, thank you. I don't know if that helps or not, but we're looking to expand opportunities, not restrict them, so. Public hearing is still open. Anyone else like to come forward? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. If there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we amend Article 30, definitions of the Goochland County zoning ordinance, to amend the definition of home occupation to delete the provision allowing the rental of rooms to tourists.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Again, this is just to strike that part of the definition that pertains to tourism through this, as a home occupation. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Flashlight?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes, that's unanimous. That passes as well. And I believe that was our 8th and final public hearing for this evening. Is there any other business to come before this board? Seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn to Tuesday, June 5th at 3 p.m. And just for those that are here this evening and watching at home, there will be no 7 p.m. meeting. There'll be no 7 p.m. meeting in the June, just be the 3 p.m. So that said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming. Travel safe.